Trench warfare is a style of warfare where a system of trenches is built on both sides to defend from and attack the enemy. It's separated by a piece of land called no man's land. This style of warfare has been around since the 1700s. It was more strongly associated with World War I on the Western Front. In the trenches, the men were either sitting there waiting to be slaughtered or charging to their deaths. Trenches were usually about 12 feet deep and dug in a zigzag pattern. You could never see more than 10 yards down the trench. This was so the trench could not be taken all at once, and so if a bomb or shell hit the trench, the blast would not travel far. The trenches were usually made out of wooden frames, sandbags, and wired mesh. The floors were covered in duck boards so the soldiers would not get mud on their boots. The average amount of time a soldier spent in the trench in World War I was about 2 weeks, but there have been cases where soldiers have stayed in the trenches for 6 months. Some sectors of the trenches didn't see much action, but in others, like the front line, were constantly attacked and bombarded with sniper fire, artillery, disease, and poisonous gas. The weapons used by the soldiers included a rifle with a bayonet, hand grenades, and sometimes even knives and pistols. The other weapons included machine guns, mortars, artillery, poison gas, flamethrowers, wire, and airplanes. The tactics of trench warfare usually consisted of one side charging the other side's trenches after a heavy bombardment. The bombardments could last for hours or days. After bombardment, a wave of soldiers with bayonets would go over the top and march across no man's land into heavy artillery fire. The opposing side would defend themselves by using heavy artillery to slow them down, and machine guns to mow down the enemy. But in case they got past the barbed wire into the trenches, the soldiers inside were ready to fight with guns and sometimes knives. Soldiers in the trenches suffered horrible injuries, infections, and deaths. Many soldiers have had to have limbs cut off because of infections from getting shot or getting hit by shell fire. There were also many diseases being spread through the trenches because of poor sanitary conditions of the trenches. Also, poor hygiene led to fungal diseases such as trench foot and trench mouth. Trench mouth being an infection of the gum tissue, and trench foot caused by soldiers having their boots on for long periods of time in muddy conditions. In order to end the stalemate, something new had to happen. This new thing was the tank, something that could go across no man's land into the enemy's trenches without getting destroyed. The British brought this to the Western Front in World War I, ending the stalemate. Since World War I, trench warfare has been a less frequently used strategy. Increased technology and other tactics have led to other approaches in day-to-day combat.